So then, I guess that we are ready to go. So I hope that you've had some coffee because I'll need your energy. If you hadn't drunk coffee, it's not a problem. You can grab some water. But then, as we're going to be together for the next 1 hour, we're going to be together for this whole hour. It's good for you to know a little bit more about myself. I know that some of you know me from Instagram, but I'd like to share something important with you all. Just a second. I'm going to start sharing the screen. Just a second. Hey, Thaisa. Great to see you over here. Let me just start here. All right. Can you all see my slide presentation? Hey, Angela. Great to see you here. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Oh, your cup of coffee is ready. Great. Today I'm not drinking coffee. I had it before the webinar, but I've got water. Okay. So yeah. Hey, Jeanette. I'm glad that you liked it. So today, as you all know, we're going to be talking about the A1 learner journey. I know that some of you teach young learners, teens, and adults, but today's focus is going to be on adults. But you can try to apply some things for your young learners' lessons as well. Then, as I told you before, as we're going to be this whole hour together, I thought it would be great for us to know each other a little bit better. And then I'm going to start with me. Who am I? My name is Tamires, but you can call me Tammy. So please call me by my nickname, okay? Tamires is only when my mom is really angry at me. And I come from a very beautiful city. Do you know which city this is? Hey, Carla. Carla's here as well from BH. Hey, Jane. Good to see you here. Oh, Daniela, the hot dog city. You spoiled it. It is Osasco. You were great. Some of the participants today, they're my students, so they know things about me. But I'd like to share with you, yes, Osasco, São Paulo. If you haven't heard, from Osasco, you should. Osasco is known for the capital of the hot dog. Actually, I included here for the real hot dog. Okay. And why is that so? Because in Osasco, we sell more than 40,000 hot dogs per day. There are lots of hot dog stands on Calçadão de Osasco. This is a place that you can go to if you want to have the real hot dog from Osasco. So this is where I was born and raised. And this is how you usually see me on social media. Okay. I run my own business. Actually, I've been teaching online for 6 years. I started in 2016, but exclusively online since 2018. And then in 2018 was the year that I decided to run my own business. My business is called Simplifique English, and then I have an online English school. So I don't have face to face students, I teach exclusively online. I started with a team of teachers, so I'm not alone anymore. So then I manage 6 teachers. So I told you that's how you see me on social media. But the ugly truth, it is this one. I'm constantly tired because I'm also a teacher, okay? I'm a teacher trainer as well. I design projects for literacy, and then I also design projects for English language teaching. So I'm constantly tired. Okay. I know that you can relate a little bit. I've got 4 pets, 3 cats, and 1 dog. Their names are Peter, Cher, and Chris, and my dog's name is Cookie. So now that you know me, I'd like to know about you, where you're from. I know that some of you have already shared where you're from, but I'd like to know how long you've been teaching. Could you please just leave your name, where you're from, and how long you've been teaching in our chat box? Oh, Pedro, for 7 years. Thais, 10 years. Oh, Fernanda. Ana Valéria, 20 years. Fernanda. Hey, Julia, over 10. Great. Wow, we've got lots of people here from Belo Horizonte, Franca, 4 years. Oh, hi, Nancy. Nice to see you here. Oh, you've been teaching forever. Oh, Nancy, I learned so much from you. It was great. Recife, Julia, 7 years. Great, great. Wow, you're studying letras, Gabriela. Great, great. Great choice. Great choice. So then, we know that teaching A1 learners can be quite challenging. It is. And today we're going to see what does it mean to be an A1 learner before we get into our some practices, some tips and strategies. So then now that I know a little bit more about you and how long you've been teaching, let's think about some of their typical profiles, actually some typical profiles of A1 learners. I'd like you to pick one of the questions that I included here in our board for you to answer. So then you can leave the number when you are writing, just include the number and the answer. Okay, so then we can get a bit more organized. You can either choose what's their typical profile as adult learners. Number two, what might they be scared of? And number three, what can they do? For instance, they can provide personal information, they can deal with small numbers. Can you help me out with this one? Choose a number and then you can answer. Let's see. I'll be waiting for your comments here. Hey, Robert. Robert is coming. Hmm. Yes, exactly. Doracema mentioned yes. Mm-hmm. That's true. Making mistakes. Oh, you see, lots of people here are really no like-minded, making mistakes. Yes. Oh, Jomar, you mentioned something really interesting. Most of my A1 learners, they have this same fear. They lead at the company, and then when they come to class, they are a bit afraid of being led by a teacher or being instructed or receiving guidance from a person who might be younger than they are. So some of the learners, adult learners, they come with these fears, making mistakes, demanding too high from themselves at the very beginning. So they compare their own production to other students, and instead of just comparing, how they have progressed in the course. Exactly. Michael mentioned here homework. Yes, some of them are afraid or scared of homework. Yes, dealing with the homework load might be a problem, and tackling this with adults, it is not the easiest thing to do, right? Yes, I believe that we are all on the very same page because we know that A1 learners can be quite challenging. They come with this package of things. And what about the teacher? How can the teacher be prepared to teach A1 learners? I remember that when I started teaching A1 learners, I was a novice teacher. I didn't have much experience and had I known some things before, I believe that I would have prepared better lessons. And this is why I decided to put together this presentation to share some of my insights, some things that I have learned, some do's and don'ts here. Actually, from my perspective, these do's and don'ts, they are not written in stone, okay? There are some suggestions that we're going to be talking about today. Now that we have talked a little bit about the A1 learner profile, I'd like to ask you something quite, recurrent in some lessons. How long should it take to learn language? Do you know? How some students have already approached you, right? Oh, teacher, how long will I take to learn this? Or can I be fluent in 3 months? Or can I be fluent within a year? And the answer, it is quite disappointing because it depends, okay? It really depends. And depends on I'd like to share with you something which was, it is a piece of a research from Cambridge University Press in which they consider some aspects in order to calculate how long learning would take place. And then it really depends because it depends on a number of factors. And then I'd like to share these factors with you today. I'll be leaving the links to the present. Actually, everything that I'm sharing with you today, I'll be sharing the links here by the end of our presentation, or I can share with you Disal and then they can send it to you. Okay. Why does it depend? So, first, we need to think about what are the factors that might impact on the length of the time that these learners would need to learn this language. So then, based on this research, how long does it take to learn a foreign language? By Cambridge University Press, they included some factors that might be helpful for us in order to elaborate this answer to some of our students. Some factors that would affect the time that they need to learn language would be, you see that I included here in yellow, dependencies for rate of learning, and then there is something really important, which is the learner and the learner environment. Which kind of course is that? Are you taking into account learners who go to school, to a regular school? Is this an intensive course? Do they attend classes once a week, twice a week? So then there are lots of factors that play a major role here in order to answer this question to students. So then let's take a look at some of these factors here. So the first one that included here for you is the learning environment, the intensity of program, the group dynamics, and access to resources. Will these students have access to a book, to some tools, extra exercises? How is this material going to be organized? And the learner, we do have some factors such as age, gender, and then I'd like to just include something here for you about gender. Cambridge is taking into account a piece of research that was taken worldwide. So we need to think about other countries in which girls do not have the same access to education as boys. We still have some gender bias taking place in some countries that prevent girls from studying more or from performing better because they have house chores. So this is why I included here gender. Okay, and then this might impact in the future as we are talking about adult learners. We also have beliefs about learning a language. Some learners believe that they just need 1 year to master the language, or even about how they should study. So, the process of helping the learners to discover how they organize themselves better, teaching them some learning strategies, teaching them how to organize their schedule, it might be really helpful as well. So students can see a better progress if they have some guidance on that as well. Another factor that might affect the length of the course would be affect an emotion. Are these learners too anxious? Do they have any previous bad experience with learning the language? So it might impact as well. Clear learning objectives. So if you inform learners about the lesson objective, about things that they should be able to do by the end of the lesson, or keep them informed about their progress, it might be another factor that might impact their motivation as learners. The first language, so if students they come from a language which they script, it is very different from English, such as Korean, Japanese, and other languages that have a total different script. It might, I'm not saying that this might prevent learners from learning fast, but it might be another challenge for them. And also the previous educational attainment. What kind of previous experience do they have? Some adult learners, they come to us as we are their last resort, right? So then we needed to think about this. How can I plan the lessons in a way that I take this into account? Am I catering for my learners in what comes to when it comes to their emotional aspects? Am I helping them to get better organized? Because A1 learners, especially if they're adults, they might not have some tricks to just to sit and study or to focus. So getting to know how they learn better, it might be something useful. What I usually do with my learners here at Simplifica, we have some sessions which we call events, so that we get students together and then we talk about learning strategies. So we talk about learning tips, organizing homework, taking notes, some useful tips on taking notes. How should they study once a week, twice a week? So we plan some events for students, and during the lessons we also talk about it. So this is key, especially for A1 learners. Yes. Yes, and then I believe that Gerald mentioned here that women are in general, yes, and then I liked that you tried to say that some of them are more sociable. Yes. So then there are lots of factors that might impact this learning journey for them. Yes. In Juma, organize their material, at least the course book. Yes. Basic instructions. These things that we take for granted, sometimes they need this kind of guidance. They do, they do. So then, as we are talking about the A1 learners, I used this description for the event name from a benchmark. And then I'd like to ask you, which benchmarks or statements of language proficiency are you more familiarized with? Which ones do you know? Virginia, great. Virginia mentioned the CFR. You might as well. Who else? Let's see if we can see a different name over here. Mm-hmm. Is there any other? The same, the same too. Yes, it's okay if you say same. If you just type in the same. Yes. Yeah, the CFR is the one that we know the most, right? But I'd like to show you that we have other benchmarks. So it is interesting for us to also get to know more about other benchmarks because some students come to us and they show some expectations. Oh, I was hired to perform this and that at this company, and then by the end of October I need to be at this level. And they say, oh, I need to be at the intermediate level, at the advanced level. But then we also need to align expectations with the students about how long it would take for them to reach those levels. Okay, so then I brought here some pieces of information about other benchmarks that you might want to get interested, and I'm going to compare them to you. Okay. Oh yes, Eliane, the IELTS would be the exam. Yes, I'm going to show you here. So these are some common benchmarks and statements of language proficiency. Have you ever heard of them? Have you ever heard these names, such as advanced low, advanced mid? Mm-hmm. Yes, I think Jumar mentioned here. TESOL would be for teaching. Yes. Okay. So now, by looking at their names, you're more familiar with them, right? Yes. And the one that I'm referring to today will be the A1. Okay. And then now that we are getting to the topic of what does it take to be an A1 learner and what does it take to get out of the A1 learner zone, I'm going to show you something which is one example from that piece of research that I started talking about, which was how long should it take to learn a language. This is the number of hours that they tried to crunch some numbers here, but I'd like you to just look at the profile of the student. Adult learner whose L1 uses the same script as English with good levels of motivation and access to good learning resources and well-trained teacher. Okay? So take a look at it. So in order for learners to master the A1 level, they would need to take this A1 level would take place between 90 hours to 100 hours. But you see how difficult it is to measure this because look at the profile of the learner. So it is an adult learner whose L1 uses the same script, good levels of motivation. This is why, okay, it is very tricky to answer to learners how long it should take, right, to learn language. So there are course books that actually organize their learning experience differently. Some course books take less hours, others more hours. But then, as private teachers, if you're not working for an institution, it is interesting for you to get to know how many hours it takes, because then you can just anticipate some questions that might arise during the course. Some learners, they might say, teacher, but I'd like to learn within a year. Is it possible? Is it possible? Okay. It really depends on the intensity of the course, the student's motivation. Okay, so then it is a question that you answer, it depends, but then you provide the students with, the feedback, not the feedback, sorry, but you provide them with the evidence. Okay. Yes. Valeria mentioned that in her latest course, she used to have one. You see? Ah, that's the difference. You see? So then that's why they crunch these numbers here. Now that you know how to answer to this question, um, A1 learners and any kind of learners, they represent a learning journey. So students do not learn overnight. And teachers might also just align their expectations because we demand too high from ourselves at times. Because of students' feedback, we kind of internalize that. Oh, my students should be performing like this, like that, but it really depends. It depends on a number of factors. And then, because this is a learning journey, I'd like to just let's recap a little bit about the CFR, because most of you mentioned that you were more familiarized with the CFR. And what is the CFR about? Let me show you something here. I brought some pieces of information about the CFR. The CFR is not something new. Okay, it is a document that has had different kinds of versions, and then there was a version that was published around 1970, 1980, that aimed at broadening this perspective language teaching and organizing the way that English was taught in Europe. It was so successful that it was widespread all over the world. So nowadays we know that this is the most famous benchmark. And one of the aims, it is transparency and coherence when assessing students. So then, as I've asked you about the CFR, there are three major things that we need to take into account when we are talking about the CFR. What do you think these three things are based on the gifts that are included here for us? What do you think? Let me know if you can guess what the CFR is about by guessing the three gifts that are included here. Oh, Kanye said, whoa, okay. Is this something that came as a surprise, Karen? Communicative ability. Some people mentioned tests here. Accuracy for abilities. You're getting there. You're getting there. Let's see. Let me show you. So the CFR, it is about learning, teaching, and then assessing. So the main aim of the CFR, it is not just to test students. It is also to think about the learning strategies and what students will need to learn in order to achieve higher levels. So it is about the teaching, because teachers, they can take more informed decisions when teaching students that fit into the A1 level, into the A2 level. And it is about assessing. And mind you, we didn't include here testing. You see, because assessment can take place in different ways, such as a more informal feedback, summative assessment, formative assessment. So we have different kinds of it. So it is not only about tests, okay? Virginia mentioned something interesting. It is also, yes, it is about learning strategies, you see? So then, now that you know a little bit more about the CFR, I decided to bring more information. And then if you want to study more about the CFR, there's a very interesting document. It is this one here, okay? It is this companion volume, and it was published in 2020, and then you can find it really easily. It is the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. It's quite big, but there is a full description of each level. So then if your focus is, let's say, B1 students, they talk a lot about the B1 level. They talk about some competences that students need to perform well. So it is a very interesting document. I haven't read everything, okay, because it is a large volume. But whenever I need to plan some lessons, I go there and then I check if that material that I'm planning, especially when I'm dealing with authentic material, if it is aligned with the level. So if I anticipated correct questions or some difficulties, if I provide the solutions before teaching the students as well, I'm going to leave you with this, okay? And then, as we were talking the CFR, it is very important for us to see the CFR as the view of the CFR, because they really want students to succeed. Okay, not just to test them or to say, "Oh, you're not doing well on these and that, at these and that." So there is this social, educational, and professional domains concern. Okay, so then, having said that, I'd like to just share some useful piece of information about the can-dos. And before we talk about the can-dos for the A1 learners, I'd like to hear from you or to read from you. Why do we use a can-dos? Any ideas? Let's see. Let's see if we have. Ah, yes. Very good. Inez mentioned to know what students can do. Yes. Yes, I'm taking a look at Geraldo. Geraldo mentioned here that I guess the most difficult aspect is struggle to produce, yes, the same level. Expectations, right, Geraldo? Yes, exactly. Oh, Amanda, you have mentioned something interesting. Self assessment as well takes place here. And of course, that I'm not giving you the answer right away, okay? I would like to include another challenge for us. Why do you think the can do's they have to do with nurses and teachers? How are nurses and teachers similar when it comes to the can do's? Do you think? I'm reading lots of interesting comments here. Jessica, hey Jessica. Jessica mentioned here, so the students can have an idea of what they're able to do. Exactly. So this sense of progress, it is key to A1 learners, A2 learners, B1 learners, all kinds of learners, providing them with the evidence. It is fundamental. Jumar mentioned, depending on the results, we are teachers slash nurses will offer support. Yes, you are on the right track, but there's something interesting about the CFR and the can-dos. When I started researching more about it, I found out that the can-dos, they were based on nursing. So that these the can do's, these descriptors as a competence, they come from this idea of nurses. So the idea of scientifically calibrating can do descriptors to a scale of levels comes originally from the field of professional training for nurses. Tests were not very helpful in assessing a trainee nurse's competence. You see, the short descriptors would be better in assessing them. Instead of just saying what they were not good at, the can do's were much better to describe what was expected from a nurse. And this is why it has been used. Quite interesting, right? I guess that, yes, there was someone here that mentioned Monica. Hey, Monica, thanks for sharing, Monica. Monica mentioned that what might be in common, it is knowledge and abilities. Great, great comment. Yes. So then, now that we have discussed a little bit about the benchmarks and the CFR and what a can do is, I'd like to invite you to think about this. So, when we think about the CFR, we're talking much more about proficiency over deficiency. You see? So, when informing learners what they can do well or areas for improvement, areas that they perform well, so we are working on that, and we're also working on students motivation to keep studying. So then, the most important for us as teachers is also to know what students can do or can perform. I included I was a bit mean when I started planning today's session. I included I actually there are 9 gaps. Okay, that I included here for us. And how would you complete these gaps? And I'll give you, let's say, 3 minutes for you to think about. So you're going to use one key word for each gap. Can you? I'll give you 3 minutes. I'm going to time you. Okay. Look at the board. I'm going to just set the timer here. Let's say 2 minutes and a half to 3 minutes. Off you go. Take a look. Hmm. I can see that some of you are doing quite well. All right. Short. You're doing well. You still have a minute to go. Okay, let's see. We've got personal. Okay, Jamar, no problem. We'll be here waiting for you. Okay. Oh, Pedro Henrique. Doing well. 20 seconds to go. Hmm. Rose has also completed loads of them. Okay. Thaisa is here as well. All right. Sorry to cut you short, but then let's see. Okay, so I'm just going to include it here. So as for the first one, oh, I can see that some of you got it. So what can the A1 learner here? Of course, that we're talking about something more general. Okay, we do have A1 learners that can perform better at some of these. Okay, yeah. So number one would be carefully, the second, slowly. So, can understand questions and instructions addressed carefully and slowly to him, her. And the third one would be follow. Okay? Can understand numbers, prices, and times. I could see that some of you did correctly. Okay. Then the fifth, personal, can ask for and give personal information, address, telephone number, nationality, age, family, and hobbies, can handle numbers, quantities, cost, and time. You see that here it is written can handle numbers. So they are able to deal with uh, small numbers, or for example longer numbers with million or thousands. So we need to just grade how we're going to give this challenge to students. And then a question is, why is it helpful for us to use can do's? And this is not a question that I'm going to answer right now. I'd like to hear to read from you. Why is it helpful for us to use can do's? Do you have any ideas? You can just write it down here. Why should we use, or why we don't have to, okay, but they can be helpful. And then I'd like to the interesting that you mentioned that to measure students progress. Okay, and do you recall that when I've shown you the CFR, I told you that the CFR was about three things, right? It was about learning, teaching, and assessing. Yes. Would you say that this is helpful to align students' expectations about the levels that they are in? And I mentioned here there's a sequence. So there is a suggested sequence to be followed. It doesn't mean that, Tami, so I shouldn't teach the present perfect before the simple past. We're not saying that. We're not talking about the language, the target language that you should teach or not, but we're talking about what it is expected from learners at this level. Okay, so it really helps learners when they are studying as well. So when you inform learners what they're going to be exposed to, and in the classes, you inform the learning objectives, such as, today we're going to be learning about, we're going to be talking about how to exchange personal information. And then you highlight on different situations in which the learner can apply that knowledge, it becomes simpler for them to see the progress. So whenever you're teaching, exchanging personal information, or providing telephone number or talking about dates, always try to focus on highlighting which situations would they use that. So that's what I do with some of my students. I usually ask them, we're just learning about introductions, so how would you do the same for a global meeting? How would you introduce yourself in a global meeting with your global team? So let's pretend that I am your CEO, and then you're going to introduce yourself to me. So try to create these situations that are real life situations so they can see the importance. So even at a very, very, very lower level, they can see the importance of learning how to introduce themselves, how to be confident. Because some students, they believe that it is really easy to introduce themselves. Hmm, Little do they know, right? Because it is not something easy if you're not trained for that. They're going to join a global meeting, and they needed to just say, "Hi, my name is, I work for this area." Some students, they get stuck. So if we actually, if we plan, or we provide them with these real life situations in the classes, it is way better. And chances are the students are going to stay with you for longer. So getting to know the can do's is not only a strategy for you to have the students happy in the class, it is also a retention tool. Okay, informing them, focusing on their sense of progress, it will always be, something that you can use in your favor. Yes. Yes, I get that. Ana Valera mentioned here that teachers are guided to follow books which always present a certain sequence. Yes, and then it's also helpful for you to know what the sequence is. Why is it helpful? Because next time that the students are introduced to the same topic that they had been introduced before, such as introducing themselves or greetings, you have another chance for them to revisit and expand on the knowledge. You see? So if students tell you, ask you, teacher, but why are we looking at it again? Why do I have to practice on numbers again? So highlight this importance here. So we're going to revisit the knowledge and expand a little bit more, because now you're not dealing only with small numbers. You are informing bigger numbers, or you are dealing with the percentages. You are dealing with, you are informing the forecast of your company, for example, how your company did in the last quarter. So you see, try to get these small things and highlight the importance of learning it. And of course, if you work with a course book, it is also really helpful for you to see the learning objectives, what students will perform well at. So what should I expect from this student for this activity? Should I correct everything? So this is also connected to error correction, because you're not going to be over correcting your learner if he or she is not able to deal with this challenge of language. You see, for instance, if you were just teaching them simple expressions and they really wanted to say something more sophisticated, you can tell them how you say it. But if the student makes a mistake next time that he, she, or they use these expressions, you're not going to be overcorrecting. So the can do's, they're helpful not only for us to make more informed decisions, but also which should I correct? Should I correct everything? Should I correct this use of simple past? The student was not exposed formally, let's say, because they are exposed because they receive exposure from the media, podcasts, lots of things. So we also needed to really align expectations because the students, they are not this blank canvas, right? But I shouldn't be overcorrecting. So be careful when I am teaching A1 learners. I always have bear in mind this, so the student can understand slower pieces of information. So I'm going to help him or her or them to build their knowledge little by little. So I'm not going to be overcorrecting here, or I'm not going to correct it at all for this moment of the lesson. So then I can give them more room for talking, expressing their own ideas. So, and I also get to know better how the learners are, how they feel about correction. Okay, because this is something that I usually talk with my A1 learners. If I have groups, I usually approach them individually and then I ask them, listen, this is how I usually correct. No worries, I'm not going to expose you if I'm teaching groups. And then I usually tell them when I give feedback, I always have a feedback slot in my courses, either for A1 learners or C1, C2 students that I have. And then I collect from the group, and then I filter a little bit if the student has shared personal information or name of a family member. I change the name of the family member, and then I usually use my cats or my dog, and this is how I provide feedback. If I'm teaching one-to-one learners, one-to-one learners, I usually tell them there are moments in the lesson that I'm not going to interrupt you, and then I usually use this delayed feedback, just not at the end of the lesson, but after we finished one part of the activity, and then I provide them with feedback. So there are some students that they say, teacher, but aren't you going to correct me? So then I align expectations with them at the very beginning. What I usually do with the A1 learners, I have something which is called day zero. Okay, which is a session that I have with them, just to show them how I usually teach the lessons. This is after they have enrolled for the course. And then I do some dynamics, and then I teach them how to use the tools because I teach exclusively online. My school is completely online. So, and then I teach them some tools. I teach them how I usually provide them with feedback. So then I try to lower their, anxiety by showing this is what I'm going to be expecting from you. Something that I usually do is when I'm teaching a new piece of language, I don't try to use many new softwares. What do I mean by that? If I have never used Jamboard with my learners, I just use it when I'm reviewing some language or some vocabulary. So if I'm teaching something very new to students, especially A1 learners, I try to build something with which is more familiar to them, such as a tool or something like that, and then to revisit that language, I include a new tool such as a Padlet, Jamboard, Google Slides. I usually use Google Slides for my session, so it's not a problem for them. So then I try to anticipate some moments that they would be more anxious. And also the instructions, right? We need to grade a little bit the instructions. Now that we talked a little bit about the can-dos and also about the correction, I'd like to share something else with you, okay? I would like you to this is a mantra, okay? This is something that I have written on a sticky note on my bulletin board. Learning is not linear. And then I tell my learners, why do I do so? Because students, they come with a lot of expectation to the course, and sometimes they blame themselves. Oh, Tammy, I should know this by this moment of the course. Learning is not linear. If it was linear, students would come to class, they would master things that they learned, and then we move on and on. But it isn't. This is why these moments to revisit and expand what they know are so important, and informing them that learning is not a linear process. We have some ups and downs. There are some difficult topics for us to handle with vocabulary. It is not something that we get from the day one that we saw the word, so it takes some time. So Learning is not linear. If you are leaving this session with something, I hope it is this this phrase here. And then the CFR is really helpful, but we should also think about it as the colors of the rainbow. We can see the colors of the rainbow, right? We see some distinct colors, but language proficiency is actually a continuum. Okay, so it is not something that, oh, today I'm A1, tomorrow I'm B2, or tomorrow I'm A2, and then I'm B1. So we tend to see some colors more than the others. This is why we have those learners who are A2, but still need some practice on some A1 areas. And this is common because it is not just like something, that finishes. Oh, A1 finishes here. Let's go to A2. You're not A1 anymore. So some of the learners can bring these characteristics as well. Okay. So then, demanding more from these students has to do with the kind of support that you provide them with. So you see that included something here to illustrate what I'm about to say. Of course, we're going to be talking about scaffolding. Okay, and then included here is something that you might take notes on. And I collected some of the jargons that I'm using here. I usually use this website, the ELT Notebook. Great website. Have you heard of it? Let me know. No, Marina, I think you're going to like it. That's quite useful. So, if you want to study more about teaching English or language learning, there are interesting jargons for you to see there. I know that there are some schools that they provide you with amazing teacher's guide. So, they explain everything, but others don't. Okay. So, if you wanted to get to know more what each teaching jargon is, you can get to this website, the NELT Notebook, and then you can get to know lots of new expressions. So it has to do, so demanding more from students will have to do with how you have built the support for them. You shouldn't just be demanding too high from students if you haven't helped them to build the support. So then I'm going to show you here something which is called the scaffolding. You can take a look at it at this website that I like very much, the LT Notebook. And the way that we build the support will help the learners to access something that it might not be so clear for them. So the way is we build more support when the task is more challenging for students, and depending on the way that you have built it, you're going to remove the support. This support can be either by grading language, giving shorter instructions, providing students with more visuals on the lessons, just breaking down the activities. And then when they need to do something more challenging, you remove the support that you have built, and then the students, they perform it in a more autonomous way. So the idea is the teacher will be this person who will facilitate the learning process to take place. So I included here some types of scaffolding, such as the teacher feeds or predicts the piece of vocabulary that students would need. They check their understanding and then you pronounce it. So I can see that there are some teachers that come to some of my mentoring sessions, and they prepare a very, very huge list of new pieces of vocabulary, and they ask the students to repeat before the students know what that means, what those words mean, sorry. So this is something that we should avoid. Okay, so first the students need to know what it means, and then after they should know how to pronounce it. Okay, there is something quite important, which is giving students or providing students with this time to think. When the students, they are in silence, they're planning, actually they're hypothesizing about things they have learned. So we needed to allow there to be, in silence. So for instance, before I asked you to tell me the keywords to complete the can do's in our previous exercise, I gave you some time to think. Okay, A1 learners, they need this time, and sometimes they need more time, more than 1 minute. So allow them more silent time for them just to think more, okay? And give them the chance to ask you a piece of vocabulary. So I wouldn't say that I only speak in English with my A1 learners. We have some moments in the lessons that I allow them to ask me many questions in Portuguese, and then we try to just get these keywords put into sentences. But then I allow my students to speak their first language, because most of my A1 learners speak Portuguese, which is my first language. But I've already had students who are from Argentina, and then I don't speak Spanish. My Spanish is very limited. The only thing that I can speak is despacito, poquito, poquito, the only thing that I can speak. So then it makes the process a bit more challenging. But then I allow them to try to ask me more questions. So I show myself really open so then they can ask me. And then modeling, okay? Don't forget to model. I see that there are some teachers that they just give the instructions, they give an example, and they ask learners to perform. Don't do it. Take it easy. They're A1 learners, so try to break your instructions first. Then you ask the students, you check if they understood the task, and then you model the first one with them. And then if you need, model the second as well, so students build more confidence. And students believe that we have some expectations when it comes to their own performance. Some students say, "Oh, Tammy will think so low of me because I haven't performed well in the class." I had some A1 learners crying because they couldn't perform the task. So then I needed to really rethink the way that I was providing instructions, because I noticed that I was in a rush at times. So then I needed to just grade a little bit. I don't know if you have ever had a learner crying, but it is heartbreaking. Okay. And then I felt a bit bad. And then I revisited some of my instructions. And then by the end of the lesson, I was able just to help her to feel more confident. But it happens. Okay. Yes, Gilmar, it is awful. I felt awful. Yes, awful. Yes, yeah, Geraldo, we always have to give examples. And regardless of the level, there are some C1 and C2 learners that they just look at the slide, they believe that they know what they are doing, but they aren't. Okay, so providing them with examples is essential. Then I included here some key principles when we are teaching A1 learners. Provide them with enough thinking time. Let them rehearse. Okay, if you ask them to perform a speaking activity, dry run, let them rehearse. Okay, and then you can include, oh, this is the dry run moment, a moment for you to rehearse before we perform the task. And then if you are teaching a speaking lesson, don't forget, you are going to ask them to perform the task, you provide them with feedback, and then you do the task again, so they take into account the pieces of feedback that you have given. Okay, don't forget about that. And then include here that modeling is of the essence. Learners, they feel much more confident when they see somebody performing first, and then after they can go along. Okay, so then I included here some questions to guide our lesson plan, and I would say that reflective practice, it is essential, regardless of the level that you teach. A1, A2. Are my instructions clear for the task? Have I checked if they know what they're supposed to do? Checking questions here. Instruction checking questions, actually, for this one. Are there prompts the students can resort to? What do I mean by prompts? Some teachers that come to my mentoring programs, I can see that in their slides, the slide is beautiful, but there isn't the support for the learner. So just include some prompts when answering. For instance, um, letter A matches letter B. Try to make something a bit, longer. So I think letter A. So then help them with this piece of language, because it might be really useful, especially if you're teaching groups. Whenever you are checking an exercising group, try to include some questions such as, what about you? What do you think? So then they can agree, disagree. It is very basic, but they really like it. It is actually teaching English nowadays. Has to do with empowering students to use this language. So the language is not the language of the other, it's not the language of the foreigner. So English has been taught as a lingua franca. So students need to feel that that language belongs to them as well. So if they feel empowered to use it, if they see that they don't need to have actually to meet the standards of a native speaker, students, they feel empowered with that language. And then we should foster this sense of belonging, that the language belongs to them from the very basic levels. Okay, so students, they like it when they feel empowered, when they ask questions in English. So I guess that motivation, it is quite difficult to have if students, they don't feel that the language belongs to them as well. And the last question that we have mentioned, have you provided enough modeling? So, modeling fundamental over here. Okay. Yes. Ana Valéria mentioned here, giving clear instructions will help them a lot. Yes. Very much. Very much. I don't know if you have ever been in that place that you had planned a beautiful session, many interesting exercises, and then, oh, I'm going to provide feedback here and there, and the students get stuck at the very first exercise. It makes us really frustrated because we needed to rethink about the way that we had provided them with instructions if we have checked. So if you don't want it to feel a bit frustrated, you should plan for those moments. And if your class didn't go well, try to revisit your instructions. Plan for more moments for you to reflect, because I know that we don't have much time to do so, but I'm going to tell you again, reflective practice will help you a lot. We need to revisit our beliefs as teachers, and so then we can also understand if students are really difficult to deal with, if they are disruptive. Okay. Yes. Exactly. Doing things in a rush is likely to make you redo it. Oh, such a beautiful sentence. Yes, such a beautiful sentence. So then, I'm going to just for us to wrap up our day. I'd like to show you something that I adapted for my A1 learners. The activity would be this one. They would need to be exposed to grammar, verb to be, with WH questions, and by the end of this exercise, students would need to collect specific pieces of information. What I did was a bit different. So then, because I had some time, I wanted to change the picture, because the picture here wouldn't help that much for students to recognize that this would be a situation in which they would be exchanging personal information. So, as A1 learner, I'm not saying that A1 learners are more visual than A2, B1, B2 learners, but the pictures, they make a whole difference here. Let me show you the picture that I have chosen. I've chosen this picture, which is a beautiful picture, and I wanted my students to predict what they would be talking about. So then here I helped them with some strategies to also activate what they already know about exchanging personal information and all. Then my next actually my next step would be this one. Now I'm going to just get out of the full screen mode, and then I'm going to show you what I did. I covered this because this is a real student. This is what I did with a real student. I asked her to come up with 5 keywords to describe the picture. And then she annotated on my board. And this is the same activity that I do with groups. Okay. And then I didn't correct everything, you see. So this purple one, it is what she had written. And then I just corrected the spelling. It was something that I congratulated her on. This wasn't the first lesson. We were in lesson, I think, lesson 6 for this one. Yes. And then she asked me, teacher, But what about meet and mens? This is a student. She loves learning about grammar. Okay, she loves it. Although I don't mention many grammar names for my A1 learners, I try to use other strategies, and little by little, I'm going to be referring them to, oh, this is a verb, this is an adjective, this is a learner that loves it. And then I corrected because she asked me about it, and then I included here for her. She asked me, oh, this is a verb, this is a noun. She knows it because she likes it. So I decided to break the activity a little bit more. You see, I haven't started with the listening. So before the listening, I prepared my learner for what would come next. The next one, the next actually, the next step would be this one. I'm going to show you here. Just a second. Oh, yes, this one over here. So I checked with her if she knew what personal information was. So I did it like this. I'm going to cover here so then I don't spoil it for you. I told a story. I told her that Jordan wanted to buy a new car, and then I just pointed out. I checked with her if she knew what a salesperson was, and then she gave me one example here. And before getting to listen, I asked her to give me examples of personal information. So here I was preparing her for the task a bit more. And then I asked her to make a list of four possible sentences they can mention in the conversation. So this is something that this student is used to, because we had this day zero, and then I constantly asked for her to help me with some exercises. And then she boarded here the purple sentences, and then I corrected the others. And then we listened to the conversation. When she listened to the conversation, she was able to see, to check if the questions that she had predicted or the questions that she had boarded were present in the conversation. So then it was another step for us to build. Remember that we were talking about the scaffolding, the way that we build the lesson. Then we would go for the specific information task. And before we listened again, I asked her to tell me which pieces of information she would use for each number. So I asked her, oh, his name is Jordan, what's missing? And then I asked her, is this his first name or last name? So by asking more, yes or no questions, it helped her to just communicate more with me. So then I boarded what you can see here in orange, and these are the piece of information that she collected. You can see that she didn't write Washington correctly, but I hadn't corrected. And why? Because they didn't spell the name. So then I didn't correct the exercise. And then when we moved on to the script, I asked her to check if her contributions on the board were the same in the conversation. So then, yes, I'll share the slides. I'll share the slides. I will. So you see, so I prepared her for the task. So then later on, we could role play, we personalize the information. So then here, you see, the scaffolding moment took place because I prepared her to listen to the piece of information instead of just asking her to perform this task here. This was the original task. So think about the picture, how you can grade the task. I know that when you work for an institution, it is more challenging for you to change the pictures, but use the school's material and check how can I grade the instructions for my learners here. You can ask them, don't open your books, cover the cover the conversation, don't look at it. So you can use what you have, make use of what you've got around. I'm going to share the slides here with you. I will just copy the link, and then I'm going to share over here, and I'm going to pin the comment. The You can see that it is pinned. Okay, great. I can see that some of you are already coming. Excellent. There are other exercises here that you can think about. And then I'd like to, just before we wrap up, because we don't have much time, I'd like to read from you. What are your takeaways from today? What are you taking to your lessons? You can write it here. Oh, let me just see if you are. Ah, yes. You can make a copy of these slides as well. Okay. Anytime, anytime. Day zero is a great idea. All right. Great. Never take yes. I'm just going to put here and then I'm going to be with you here. Just a moment. Yes. Anytime, anytime. I'm really, really, really happy that you liked it. So, if you wanted to know more about my job, I just included here a button so then you can be referred to my profile. You can send me an email. You can find me at simplifica.ingles, which is my Instagram. And then it was a pleasure to be here with you. And then I hope that you can rethink. Today was an invitation, okay, for you to rethink the way that you've been teaching your A1 learners. And then I really, really hope to see you pretty soon. Okay. Thank you all. Bye bye, everyone.